welcome to Flickin' Reel, your friendly neighborhood fan cast. We are your source for news, reviews, and daily discourse. On today's show, I'm joined by my friend Scott Fox.
Good morning, everybody.
Today we'll be discussing the current landscape of films with all the delays, flops, and heartbreaks. Are you ready?
There are many.
There are several in each. All right, well, let's get right into it, starting off with release date pushes. So one of the first that we can get into is Wonder Woman, who has just hit its 6th release date from initial announcement. And a few of those have absolutely nothing to do with the pandemic, but the pandemic has certainly added to those numbers.
Absolutely.
So originally the film was supposed to come out December 13th, 2019. Which was almost a year ago.
I'm going to go out on a pretty far limb and say this most current release date of December, December, or Christmas Day, Christmas Day 2020, is going to be pushed.
Oh, sure.
Because, not to get off on the COVID garbage, if things don't dramatically change with this next round of the flu and the cold season, I just don't see this happening, which is sad.
Putting it right by on Christmas, we'll get to talking about this movie later, but it puts it within just a couple weeks of Dune, which is another large Warner Brothers release, and something's got to give.
I can't imagine they would want to compete head-to-head with themselves, so one of the two will be pushed. To be honest, I think if they're going to push and hold one, I would hold Dune till later, as well, and just get this moment over with for Wonder Woman, get it out, or go the path of Universal and get it straight on the streaming platforms right into people's hands direct
for a premium price, like they did with Bill and Ted and stuff too.
Yeah, you could pay it'd be worth paying the $20 or even upward of that, maybe even $30 to get it immediately
in front of a family or get a few people over.
We talked about this before. I have 4 kids, and my wife included. If we take everyone to the movie, it's a minimum $100 day. Yeah. So $30 to do it at home. I can make my own popcorn, things like that. Makes it much more palatable as far as the pocketbook for a family.
And just to bring up a movie like Bill and Ted, they got more money out of me than they would have initially, because when I brought it up, it said, "Do you want to rent this for $20 or buy it for $25?" And I said, "Hell, I'll just buy it."
Whenever there's that kind of opportunity to pay the extra $5 to just own the movie, especially on something where you're saving on going to the theater, it's worth the $5 extra investment, because then if it turns out to be good, I'm already spending $20, $25, and if it's good, I can watch it again. Definitely. Yeah, so they would have gotten the exact same money out of me, or they would have gotten the more out of me as well. I still have not seen Bill and Ted's, but that idea that I can own it without having to go out to the theater. But I think that's what we might see with Wonder Woman. Dune, I think, will probably be held off, maybe be that May release next year. That there's a sweet window there in May.
I think you have more of a built-in audience and a proven IP with Wonder Woman, making close to $1 billion on its first movie, that Wonder Woman is something that I think, as theaters start to open up, if they're still opening up, like now it's starting to sound like we might just revert right back to having them all closed again. But if they can stay open a little longer or open up some other theaters, Wonder Woman's one of those ones, I think more so than Tenet, that people will go out of their way. If they have to travel 45 minutes, an hour, they'll make an event out of it. Whereas Tenet, people were waiting for the reviews. Reviews didn't hit what they wanted to, and they're like, I'll wait.
No, that's huge too. If Wonder Woman pulls in, it's still currently, I think, the highest rated on Rotten Tomatoes for...
rated? Yes.
It's the highest rated, not the highest grossing, but the highest rated movie for DC out of the newest batch, the DCEU. If Wonder Woman 84 pulls the same kind of reviews, statistics, that will build some anticipation and cause people to want to maybe make that effort to go drive 30 minutes further to get a movie, since you can't just walk down the hill and go to the theater that's right next to your house anymore.
I mean, before reviews started coming out, I was entertaining the idea of driving almost 4 hours to a certain spot in Oregon because there was a theater. And I was like, I need to see a theater, so I was going to do that for Tenet. And then I kind of lost some of the interest. Wonder Woman, I would do it for.
Let me just say, I've heard mixed stuff on Tenet. I still think that's worth the view in the theater because of what Nolan's been able to do in the past, and he usually doesn't let down.
I'm sure it's a cinematic
Dark Knight
experience.
Rises aside, he usually does not fail people in the theater. And while it may not be everyone's cup of tea, there were mixed reviews for Inception initially too, and that's widely received as a fairly good movie.
But visually, it's worth seeing in theaters, whether you liked it or not.
Absolutely. You may not be able to follow the storyline. You may be left with the question at the end of whether he was dreaming or he wasn't, if he had actually escaped. Tenet deserves the opportunity to be seen in a theater in the same way that all these movies, the amount of money, time, and energy that was put into making them, they deserve to be seen in the theater. However, if you're not going to get that, we've seen the success rate with Trolls World Tour, Bill and Ted's. There is an option to get it direct to streaming, to get it to people in a timely fashion. Because the hard part is now with pushing release dates, we're going to see a bottleneck of movies that were produced that are going to be competing for the dollar head-to-head with so many movies.
With no movements right now, I believe that... I'd have to go down the list, but I think into 2021 right now, we have 4 DC films and 4 Marvel movies now.
That's
after not having a Marvel movie for what will be 2 years.
Yeah, which is a huge break for Marvel. To be honest, and I know I had reached this, and I'm in the minority here, I understand. I had reached saturation point after Endgame, where I was good with being done with Marvel for a little while. So a 2-year break.
I'm good for a year. I didn't need to.
Not necessarily that I needed 2 years, but I'm okay with it. It was fine because the build up so long to Endgame, the whole decade that went into that moment, when it was done, it felt complete. I was ready to just take a back seat. I didn't need an immediate continuation.
Sure.
Some of these movies are suffering because they didn't get the continuation. Wonder Woman deserved to have that movie be out already. And boy, I'm sure they're kicking themselves for not having it done in December 2019.
Well, Patty Jenkins is upset because the last release date, I think she said she had it done in like May of last year or something like that. And she said like we could have released it, but we wanted to give it like a different date. And now look at what happened.
Yeah, it's sad because
they've been sitting on this movie for over a year.
Yeah, it's in the can. It's done. It's finished.
Been done.
All they have to do is put it on a reel and play it.
Yeah.
Or, that's old school speak. They just digitally push play. Yeah, you're not going to see the cigarette burn marks in order to let you know when to change the reel. But these movies, you and I are kindred spirits in that the theater is the place to experience a movie.
Yeah.
Not every movie deserves that. But usually you don't know until you've seen it. Then you're
lot
like,
of the
I could have
times-
waited till I was at home.
Comedies, a lot of times I'll wait unless it's something I really feel the need to see.
True. Action movies specifically, they usually have the visual spectacle. Mulan probably would have looked better on the big screen than on your home, and we've seen that how Disney handled that did not pan out as well. So the hope is that they will have figured something out. But some of these movies I just feel like are going to have to go to the streaming platform because of the bottleneck that's coming. There's going to be 2 movies. You're going to have 19 movie theaters playing 19 different movies because they've got so much out there.
And there's nothing to say, like, because the industry re-releases all the time, after something goes out on streaming, in the eventual return of these theaters, that they can't put it in theaters after it's already been released. I saw Jurassic Park 20 years later,
How many Oscar winners never even saw the light of day because they were independent, that after they get the Oscar buzz, get a re-release in the theater that then makes them a mountain more money?
For to be lined up for an Oscar, all the requirements are that you have to have been open at an LA theater during the fiscal year, before, and that's like it. So like it can be like 1, 2, 3, like 5 theaters, and as long as like they were able to get to it, then it's eligible is the word I was looking for earlier.
But I think that's why we're going to see a second runs might help. Bill and Ted's I still would love to see in a theater, but I don't think that theaters or studios can sit on these assets and not capitalize on some money. The amount of money that goes into the promotion, the advertising, everything that goes out, they can recoup some of that and get the movie out into the people's hands immediately. And Universal already proved that you can make a good amount of money quickly through that.
And before we move on to the next movie that got pushed, one of the points I wanted to make. Actually, I completely spaced. So let's just move on to. We were talking about Marvel, so we'll go. We started talking about Black Widow a little bit. So that's another one that has been pushed. This is going to be its third date, I think. It was originally supposed to come out in May, and then because theaters closed in, what was it, April, I think, was the big closing? It was either late March or
late March.
Okay, late March is when they closed all the theaters. And so they're like, well, I'm sure this will all be good and handled by November. And we are about to hit October, and looking forward towards November, it seems unlikely. And I think after some of the financial travesties that Marvel Studios and Disney has witnessed, they think it's a lot safer to push it way into the future, and they're going to move it up to May, a full year after its initial release, making it dang near 2 years in between Marvel films.
Yes.
23 months.
That's pretty
Because
that's
close. Far From Home was June something.
That's far enough that saying 2 years just works.
Yeah.
And that's, I think one of the challenges with Black Widow is, I know they're hoping to capitalize on the female superhero movement. Especially Wonder Woman's success was outstanding.
Captain Marvel made over $1 billion.
Captain Marvel was outstanding. These movies showed that there is a market for a female lead superhero movie. The hard part with Black Widow is I don't know how many people were clamoring for this movie. Some people were, but
At this time.
At
Like,
this
they
time.
were clamoring for it maybe 6 years ago.
spoiler alert for those who have not seen Endgame.
Listening to the wrong podcast.
We know the fate of Natasha. So, do we need a movie giving the backstory to a character we know how her story ends? This would have been great to fill in the backstory prior to everything that happened, to actually get engaged emotionally with the character a little bit more.
Release this movie in the time period that's taking place, because it takes place right after Civil War. That would have been a great time to have this movie.
Yeah.
Because that was when I liked her the most.
Oh, absolutely.
Was like right after, like, Winter Soldier and Civil War is like the highlight of the character for me.
Absolutely. They really did a great job from Civil War all the way through Endgame, building this character quite a bit. You were emotionally connected. When her pinnacle scene in Endgame happens, you get emotional and teary-eyed with the exchange between her and Hawkeye. It's real. Or I guess Ronan, Clint, whichever one you want to call him. That moment, you were invested there, and it's emotional. And then when Clint gets back, and even Hulk is pissed and emotional about what happened to her. That's the frustration with this movie, is like, well, you're putting out the movie about this character who's amazing 3 years after you should have.
I think part of it is, or one of the things that justifies this movie a little bit is I think they are trying to use elements of this past and use Black Widow's story to tie in things that are going to have an impact on the future of the MCU.
Absolutely, but it's still misplaced. In the sequence of the movies, I feel like it's just misplaced. It could have been used to better effect early, but I also feel like there was a lot of backlash against Marvel for not having enough female lead movies. Captain Marvel specifically being the one they had, but they already had a character.
They were
who was,
22 movies in, and they're like, here's a female lead.
Yes, on a character who had been there from the beginning. The first Avengers movies where she came in, and we should have had her. She should have had a female lead movie, her own standalone, earlier than anybody else.
Well,
and
after 2012, everyone's like, so Hawkeye and Black Widow don't get a movie?
Oh, absolutely.
But everyone else did?
And you want to talk about a buddy cop movie you could have had with Hawkeye and Black Widow?
When they announced Black Widow, I'm like, shouldn't it be Budapest? Like, where's the Budapest Disney Plus series?
They reference what happened in Budapest so many times and never... We still don't know what exactly goes down there. It's just disappointing because I feel like it was an opportunity for Marvel after the fact to catch it. And now, not only was the movie done too late, now with the push, I don't know how many people are really that invested in the character anymore. I hope. And let me, before I sound like somebody who's like somebody wants to listen to this and say I'm a woman hater or something. I pray it makes a mountain of money. I pray it's super successful and it gets great reviews.
We're just analyzing the situation.
Scarlett Johansson is a fantastic actress. She's incredible. And I really do hope this pans out for her, and that it also, I'm sure knowing Kevin Feige, whatever you want to pronounce it, I know that he...
Fajiji.
Yeah, exactly. I know that he is a wizard as far as working these things together. He's going to produce something in this that will totally set him up for Phase 14 down the road. We don't know exactly what that is yet, or what it will look like, but it hopefully will build the anticipation in. I just feel like it's a shame because the movie was later than it should have been, and then got pushed, really taking the wind out of the sails.
I think they were asking a lot for people to still be interested in a character, like you said, that we know their fate within a year after Endgame. But now it's like 2 years, and it's so removed, and it will feel by the time we get around to it, it's like this character's story's been over for what seems like,
I think that's the saddest part, is if this had been earlier and we didn't know her fate, this could have really done something for that character
and that scene would have all the more impact. I mean, now we could watch this movie and then go back and watch Endgame and have that, kind of like you watch Fellowship of the Ring after watching the Hobbit series, you feel differently about Bilbo.
Exactly. And if you read the books, we'll get off on a tangent. I won't talk about Lord of the Rings because I'm a nerd about that. The only other thing I want to state about this movie and the disappointment with it being pushed is it has the feel of the Star Wars saga, in that the technology seems to be better in the past than in the current. And some of the stuff that Black Widow's suit and some of the things she has are
where were these things?
Why didn't she have these in Endgame? Why didn't she have some of these things? And I understand they have the nanotech things and some of those other upgrades, but unless there's some thing that we don't foresee, that this is an alternate timeline somehow, which I don't believe they're going with, it has that feel of, man, she's got some really cool stuff that she never used in the future when she would have been handy.
Well, something I'll bring up on possibly another podcast if we do it, but just bring up the Avengers game for a quick second. Black Widow is one of the main characters in that game, and you have, your suit can do invisibility, you have grappling hooks, you have projectile electric shock things, and it's just like, she Batman, and I was just like, or Batwoman, Batwoman's already a character, she Batman. And all those things are lacking from the movies. I was like, you could have made her a force to be reckoned with a lot more so than she was.
Again, and then we can move on. I feel like of all the right steps that Marvel has taken,
fair, we have to give them the credit where it's due.
They have made a mountain of right steps. I only feel like this is a misstep because I feel like this is a correction for an earlier failure. She deserved the movie 3 years ago after Civil War, not posthumously because the character's dead. That's sad for Scarlett Johansson. It's sad for Black Widow. Plus, if this is laying the groundwork for the future Black Widow to take over, where was she during Endgame?
Yeah, that is.
Where's this protege that's picking up the mantle? Oh, we don't need to call her into action until after I'm dead. That's the placement is all wrong. Of all the things they've done right, this is the one miss for Marvel, for me, as far as how they interwove this with all the rest of the stories. And again, that's pre-seeing it, so I might eat my words. So
and it's hard for this movie to be the first of what they're calling Phase 4. And it's like, you go Black Widow, which feels like it's part of a foregone
past
era, and then you have Eternals right after that. And I was like, that feels like the beginning of this next phase. You got Eternals, you got Shang-Chi, you have all these new characters, new exciting. You got Multiverse of Madness.
Love and Thunder coming.
Yeah. So it's just this giant, just storming down the gates of new things. And then Black Widow's this little outlier that's the movie that tried.
It feels like they felt an obligation to have to make this. And they did. And again, I really hope it's successful. We'll have to see how it ties to the future after we've seen it. Going in, it seems like this is just completely misplaced. And Lord willing, it will blow my mind, and it will be...
bottom line, I'm sure it'll be a phenomenal movie, but
They
all the
don't-
points.
Marvel
still stand.
doesn't put out garbage. Even their garbage movies, their worst rated movies, are still hits. For the
I mean,
most
my
part.
least favorite Marvel movie made over $1 billion. It's just I won't upset anybody.
Which, oh, never mind.
It's a third of something.
Yes.
All right, so we'll go on to talking about some of the, I would say, either financial or studio experiments during this unprecedented time. The times where the studios or theaters, people didn't know what to do. People still don't know what to do. So we're looking at different approaches that the studios have taken to try to maneuver and get what they can during this, COVID year.
Well, speaking of Iron Man 3, oh, sorry.
Ouch.
Never mind. No, specifically we're referencing Mulan here. I think the miss for Disney, they were trying to capitalize on what Universal showed with Trolls World Tour, with Bill and Ted's, but they decided to use it as a means to boost their own platform, and so they limited who could see the movie to those who were subscribers already of Disney Plus.
Which traditionally, I mean, not frowned upon. Look out for your own. Do what you got to do. Promote. I mean, Disney Plus should be promoted, but it's a big gamble here.
I think what they could have done is put it on all streaming platforms and added bonus material exclusives, or done some other type of exclusive to Disney Plus, or said Disney Plus gets it 2 weeks early
or
than
discount.
everybody else, or a
like
discount.
make it like $30 on every other service. And it's like, but you have Disney Plus, it's 15.
Yes,
or something
or
like
even
that.
20, where your $7.99 subscription or $6.99 subscription makes
Save
it
you
cheaper.
$10.
Correct. There could have been better ways to market that. I think the biggest miss is on a movie where you're looking to recoup $200 million.
At least.
You can't limit your market. You have to literally give it to and put it out for every person on the planet. And so to put it in a grouping that only allows a small market of subscribers to be able to get it, and not that Disney has a small market, but you are limiting it. Whereas Trolls World Tour and Bill and Ted's put it on all streaming. Not all streaming, but all
VOD platforms.
Yeah, all VOD platforms. So if you have a PlayStation, you could get it on PlayStation Store. You could go to
Xbox,
iTunes. You can go to Xbox. You can go to any one of those
Amazon.
stores. Amazon's a huge one. You could go anywhere and pick that movie, add it to your catalog, and you could either rent it or buy it. And you're done. But Disney said, no, if you're a Disney subscriber.
And it wasn't subscriber based to where, like, if you bought it on Amazon, you don't have to have Amazon Prime to watch it. You just bought it through Amazon. The thing about Disney Plus is like, oh, if you spend this $30, you get it as long as you have Disney Plus. And it's like, well, not everyone's going to have that forever, so you're not really buying it.
Correct.
It's like an extended rental.
Mm-hmm.
Which
go
basically all it is you pay to have it added to your subscription library, which is completely different than owning a movie.
Way different.
Because if I stop subscribing to Netflix, I can no longer watch Stranger Things, and that's basically the equivalent of what Mulan has done.
And that's...
So I'm going to really quickly run through some of the Mulan details, just for anybody that hasn't been following us closely. Mulan, Disney even came out initially and said they're really counting on overseas box office with just some of the Chinese allure and all of the culture and stuff that it's included in that film. And confidence in the project made it the most expensive Disney live-action film, and that's saying a lot because they spent a lot of money on Lion King.
Okay.
But it was over $200 million, not including their marketing, which you got to tag on another 50, 100 million, something like that. And the studio, as we're talking about, needed to find a way to make their budget back because they could only keep pushing it back so much. Eventually, they had to just come out with it, and theaters weren't really showing a lot of confidence in their ability to open, especially not in a manner that would support a Disney release. So they decided the best thing to do is to release it on the streaming service with a premium early access charge of $30, like we were saying. We disagree that was the best method, but that is what they decided to do. They did not have to suffer from theatrical profit cuts, as I have come to find out with a little bit of research. The theater takes about 45% of the ticket profit, which is a lot. So you're looking at roughly doubling whatever your budget is and then including marketing in there. So a $200 million movie needs to make somewhere like $600 million to break even, just to start making profit. And then Mulan has an audience rating of 51% on Rotten Tomatoes. That also doesn't help. And it's been reported that overall Mulan pulled in just under $45 million worldwide, not domestic. And there's movies that make well over that in their domestic opening. This is after weeks worldwide, not even $50 million. So that's a big ouch. And so we can just continue discussing why we think it performed poorly, and is this the first and last movie that Disney should do this with? Go ahead, Scott.
I think this is just going to be chalked up to a lesson learned.
What would you think is the most important lesson to be learned from this?
How not to market your own movie, how not to make it. Let's back up.
Okay.
The reason I feel like this had such huge not backlash, but lack of support, is there's no Eddie Murphy playing Mushu. No Mushu at all.
No music?
No music. The things that people loved about the animated movie. So Disney's done this crazy thing of taking the animated and they're on this huge tirade of remaking all my childhood favorites into live action movies, or as close to live action as you can get with CGI. They're remaking them all. And a lot of them are pretty close to shot-for-shot remakes. Not exactly, but the story doesn't change much. This one, they've gone way different. They decided to make this movie as though there was essentially no animated movie made. It's a completely new rendition on the story. It's not a musical. There's no songs. You're lacking Mushu. There's this huge shift. People loved Mulan because of what Mulan was.
And me and my, beautiful, amazing Disney purist girlfriend have had long conversations about Mulan, because my point was, long before there was reviews, before it came out, looking at the trailers, I said, this looks like a good movie. It does not look like Disney's, in quotations, Mulan, which is, when they did Lion King, it was Disney's CGI Lion King, basically. It felt like, it lacked some of the soul. But all these movies have been still an adaptation of Disney's own material. And this Mulan, other than maybe some visual cues, it's kind of completely its own thing, which would be fine under another studio. It's no longer Disney's Mulan.
Exactly. Well, and to be honest, when I saw the trailer, the initial trailer, and even some of the marketing stuff, your brain always kicks into try and find an association. What does this feel like? Because you want to try and put a measuring stick against everything. It's a natural reaction for all people.
And I was getting Ang Lee vibes, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
That's exact. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, when I watched it with the sword play, the stylized version of it, it totally felt like I was watching Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It had that feel specifically, and so I was like, okay, well, this doesn't really feel like Mulan. This feels like a very artsy...
Like a kung fu epic.
Exactly. And so that alone, Disney built Mulan after what they've built up. They've said, here's a one-for-one trade-off with better graphics for Aladdin, for Lion King, for Jungle Book, which... Jungle Book, fantastic. Aladdin, fantastic.
I think Jungle Book and Cinderella, call it blasphemous, I think they were improvements on the original, which is saying a lot, but I don't feel that for the rest of them. Aladdin was good. I really liked Aladdin, but not an improvement.
The only problem with Aladdin, and this is no knock on Will Smith, because Will Smith did a great job as Genie. Robin Williams is Genie.
That's like,
no question.
Let's go 15 years in the future. Somebody else plays Iron Man. Oh, you did a great job. You're not Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sorry.
You're just not going to...
That's a whole other tangent.
But who will play Mandarin? Never mind. But anyways,
nobody's played Mandarin so far.
That's
so
true.
We'll never
it hasn't been the real character. Well, a fire-breathing dragon. But anyways, the Mulan, I think, was just a miss on how they presented. They marketed it as though this is a live-action remake of Disney's Mulan. But they did not deliver a live-action remake of that. They delivered a new movie, which is fine. That's not what people were expecting. And I think one of the biggest dangers for movies as a whole, and you and I have talked about this before, is expectation. people come in their mind, they have set up what they believe they're going to see. And when they get, this can go two ways. You can believe you're going to see something and be blown away. Or you can believe you're going to see something and then find out, what the heck is this? This is not what I wanted.
And to some degree, that's partially in their benefit what they've been counting on in the past. They're like, you love Lion King, here it is again, repackaged, over $1 billion. Awesome.
The hard part is when you remake something and they are believing they're getting something that they loved. If you take a movie from someone's childhood that they had a positive, loving
connection.
Connection, that's a good word. If they were so enamored with that original movie that they were desperately looking to relive this part of their childhood, and then it wasn't, it's kind of a bait and switch.
Right.
And not in a good way.
No.
Well, and I think that's what we've seen. And then also to tack on top of that, the reviews were not as good, again, because people were expecting possibly something else. And then
I know some of the details that have caused that. I mean, we don't have to get into it, but they short-sighted the character. In what's weird is they tag on an additional hour to a lot of these movies and somehow have less character development and arcs than they did in the animated films.
Which is crazy. Because animated movies are the most rushed movies you'll ever see.
Yeah, but I could argue that, I mean, I won't go into this a lot, but you could say that about comic book movies. I've watched 15-minute long DC animated movies that have better character arcs than 2.5 hour long live action.
Absolutely.
Anyways, back to Mulan. Sorry.
I just feel like with the reviews, the limited exposure, and in business, if you've ever worked for a business, one of the adages or kind of thought processes is, if you're not everywhere, you're nowhere. That's why social media is so important. You have to be on every platform. You have to spread your visibility everywhere. And when they said that we're only going to release this to our people as a means to try and drive up subscriptions, now we don't know what they may have made on boosting subscriptions because of adding Mulan.
Sure. Which is residual.
That could be money that they've added in a different way, and you're right, it's a residual, it's coming back. But by not allowing it to be to everybody at a more economic rate, they've really pigeonholed themselves in. They may see some of this money in the long run, but I just don't see how if they've made 45, I don't know where the other 150 million's coming back in.
And that's without marketing. Like, the theaters aren't getting a cut, but they spent more than $5 on marketing, I can tell you that. So that 200 is not really the baseline for the profit. So
no, it's probably closer to 500, and or I guess they would have to, because they're taking most of the profits out of the streaming, or almost all the profits out of the streaming. I don't know how they're going to recoup the other 200 million, because let's say they have to get to 250 to break even.
Sure.
You're 205 million away. At this point, I think Disney writes this off as, this is a loss, we made a mistake, we did some things wrong. One thing Disney does really well is they learn from these things. John Carter is also one of the largest flops of all time. A movie I personally really enjoy.
I think the reviews are good for John Carter.
It is. It flopped in the theater because they didn't promote it well. People didn't know the story. They didn't do much to help understand it. Yet if you watch it, it's a visual spectacle. It's amazing. I really love that movie.
Two legendary flops that were good movies that marketed so badly were John Carter and also Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah, and John Carter is another Disney movie. You'd think they would have learned some of that. Edge of Tomorrow, a good movie, but then they rebranded it basically as Live, Die, Repeat or something like that.
Yeah, and then the Magna, I don't know how to say it. Manga, yes. That it was based off of was called All You Need Is Kill. So there's 3 different titles that you could go with for the property.
That's a movie where it just kind of slipped through the cracks. That looked like it should be really good and turned out to be great. If you've watched it, it's really good. Emily Blunt and Tom Cruise are fantastic in that movie. But they did a terrible job with marketing. John Carter was this epic failure from 20 years ago or 15 years ago. And then now we're seeing this again with Disney and the treatment of it post-production and how they handled the marketing. I think John Carter to really be better, they would have had to start work well before to get the name at least out there, because there is a great book series that character is based on.
And it's George Lucas took inspiration from it.
Correct. Yeah, that's why we have Star Wars.
Between Dune and John Carter.
But again, we're getting off on a tangent. Mulan was I think a miss because of it's hard to pin down one. It's many missteps added up.
And the last point I'll make about Mulan is there's a lot of people that will say, well, you just can't make fans happy because either they will poo-poo Lion King for being a shot-for-shot remake or poo-poo Mulan for being entirely different. And my response to that is stop making them.
Yeah. There's this great thing. It's called new ideas.
Whoa.
And boy, wouldn't it be great if we just quit dipping to the well on the things we know people loved. Let them love them. You know what's great about the original Disney movies? I loved them when I was a kid. And when I played them for my kids, they love them. Why? Because they're timeless classics. Beauty and the Beast was the other one we haven't mentioned yet. Was for a lot of it kind of a shot-for-shot remake. They did add some things that enhanced the story that were from the original books, but it wasn't the same as the original. My kids think the new Lion King, the live-action one, is a little intense and a little scarier. They love watching the older one because it's even more over the top.
Right.
Those movies stood up. They didn't need to be remade. And
who was Mulan for? Because you ride this edge when you start making PG-13 live-action adaptations. And from what I've heard, not that it's gory or anything, but on a kid level, Mulan is really violent. And I'm like, who's watching this? Because you're not showing your 5-year-old this movie anymore. But you can take it and watch the original Mulan.
Again, that bait and switch where if people didn't know that going in and you've seen all the other remakes, which is possibly why their score got a hit, is people, when you remake a movie that's a childhood favorite, and we've talked about this, and then you make it something that doesn't fit in with that age range anymore, that seems really sketchy. That'd be like coming out with...
Well, it's all those parents that went and saw Deadpool because they're like, it's a comic book movie.
Yeah. Whoops.
Whoops.
The rated R rating is there for a reason. And it pushed the boundary of R. Like, True. It was as close as you can get to an NC-17 without actually earning that moniker. Thankfully, it didn't have what was necessary for NC-17. But yeah, those movies, when you do those things, when you set it up that way and then you deliver something else, you're just setting yourself up for failure. And I think Disney will learn from this. They'll be better from this. I think that's why we've also seen Disney pushing even more dates and will continue to push dates because they know they can't move forward the same way this time. They've got to do it a different way. And that's fine. Learn. That's the biggest ask, is just learn from these lessons. And hopefully they'll learn the lesson to stop remaking childhood favorites. Just quit.
And if you are, Treasure Planet and Atlantis, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
that would be great. Movies that actually would deserve that.
Yes. Ones where the animation was great, but depending on the director and CGI and things, you could do some incredible things with those.
Atlantis would be outstanding.
Absolutely. All right, so one of the next things we're going to do is a different approach. We actually got some movies in theaters, believe it or not. Not around here, because we're up in the Northwest and there ain't nothing up here.
Our illustrious leader in this state has kept a death grip on everybody. But anyways...
Yeah, or you got people in New York that are like, we can open up bowling alleys and gyms, but theaters are too dangerous. Idiots. I have no opinions on the matter. So New Mutants opened for a second. I don't know if it's still in theaters, to be honest. So we're moving on to the final remnants of the Fox X-Men universe, what was left over from the conjoining of Disney and Fox. New Mutants has been seen as a cursed project since 2018 after 3 long years of production. Just script after script and rewrite and just all kinds of things. The movie has had what seems like a dozen release dates, even without a pandemic. Well, the Josh Boone movie has finally released to dismal reviews and a $30 million worldwide on a budget of around $70 million, not including the elongated marketing campaign. The first trailer for this movie came out almost a year and a half, I think, before the movie came out. Maybe longer.
That's a long lead time.
It's
enough time to forget about it.
Yeah, look at the cast and look at them in the movie. Like, all these people have aged like 5 years from when it was initially filmed. So just any thoughts on this trip, stumble, fall?
What bothers me is that there is a mountain of good movies that get buried by theaters, or by production companies or studios. There we go. A lot of good movies never see the light of day, and they're shelved for all kinds of reasons. Why couldn't this be shelved? Why couldn't Fox just say, we've moved on, we let this go? They were clinging to New Mutants. They don't own the rights anymore. They've sold that off to Disney. This was a last money grab moment. Into what? Muddy the water for Disney to have to clean up this mess, or just wipe it off and say it didn't happen?
Ultimately, it was Disney's decision to still release this, because now it's under their umbrella. They own the movie, and I think they're like, well, we put this amount of money over this many years, let's just get something back instead of nothing. But yikes. Yeah. 30 million, that means you're making what, less than 10 off maybe like 12 million off that, maybe. They're 12, 15, something like that.
They're 45%, you're making 13. That's again, all the movies that are garbage that get put out, and then there's a bunch of movies that, from what you hear, they're independent movies or other things, never see the light of day, and then other movies get shelved with tons of potential. Why not just move on?
And I've heard this movie's like borderline ignorant because they have all these teenagers. Like, well, teenagers insult each other, but they're like saying like Native American like racial slurs at like this Native American character in the movie. I'm like, what? Who is this movie for?
In today's culture, you can't do that. You just can't.
It's also unnecessary.
Yeah, it's unnecessary. Well, it's sloppy, cheap writing.
Yeah. As Deadpool would say, that's just lazy writing.
You have the English language is deep and variable, and you can use the full breadth of the English language to paint a picture. Yet we're still in a society that's using worn out tropes and slurs in order to...
Keep in mind, these are our main characters that we're supposed to like that are dropping these slurs.
Yeah, that's like saying things in today's... everything you say today in today's society is one of those things where you can be put on blast. In the cancel...
Ask Mr. James Gunn.
The cancel culture. Yeah, something you said a decade ago coming back to haunt you as though you're still the same person. And I always like to ask this question. You're like, well, you're still youthful, but are you the same guy now at 25-ish that you were at 15?
So the difference is 27 and 17, and absolutely not.
Okay, I'm 20 or I'm 39. Okay, if
you nice to try.
But if you ask me who I was at 29 and who I am at 39, no, I've learned a lot of things. I've grown. That kind of stuff just doesn't fly. And when you're adding that into a movie, yeah, they're teenagers, and yeah, sometimes they're stupid and they say things they don't really mean. It sticks, and now it's out there for everyone else. That's one of the dangers of social media in general, is people get caught saying things that maybe they don't necessarily believe or mean, but once it's out there, it's permanent, and youth really don't get that concept. So to foster that in a movie...
And you got a director that did The Fault in Our Stars, which I haven't seen, but I heard that it's kind of like the epitome of teen romance. You would think that he would have better sensibilities.
You'd think. But you know what? Again, a movie that should have been shelved and wasn't.
And the creator of New Mutants was funny for something for him to focus on, but he was talking about... Yes. So the New Mutants creator was... he was speaking to... It's kind of funny. Out of everything you could talk about the movie, it was just a physical representation that he was really narrowing in on, and he had a problem with, like, pretty much every single casting, every single like character design, the way their powers were shown off, and so that's never a good thing.
What's sad is I remember the first trailer for this,
and actually having some good.
Yeah, I remember talking to you and Tyler about kind of a buzz. Like, ooh, this looks like something could be really cool here.
And the premise is like, let's make a horror X-Men movie. I'm like, that could be really, really cool and unique.
Well, and there's a huge movement for kind of the dark universe trend with a lot of the superhero stuff, because we've gotten so much of the bubblegum good guy stuff that people like the hard-edged, darker version of it.
I'm a huge Crow, Constantine, Hellboy fan.
You want the DC Dark Universe worse than anybody I think I know.
Well, it sounds like I'm finally getting it because JJ's supposed to be shepherding it into HBO Max, but that's a whole other thing. But anyways, yeah, no, I completely agree that there's a push for dark materials. Not that movie though.
So much comic book stuff is not. It's not all Superman saving cats. No. Okay, it's not just the good stuff all the time. And there's so much. That's one of the things we've talked about before with comic books is the catalog to pull from.
Yeah, comic book is not a genre. It's like a format or like a medium, but you can have horror, comedy, action, sci-fi, thriller, like anything, any type of movie, westerns. You know, you got was it 100 Guns or 100 Bullets or something? I forget what it's called.
There's all kinds of
Jonah Hex. You know, you got all kinds of different things that you could do.
There's even sci-fi cowboys.
Yeah. Or was that Chris Pratt was almost in a movie that was like Cowboy Ninja Viking, I think it was called, where he had it was like a split ability personality, and he would like go back and forth. And they were writing that movie. It never came to fruition, but that was based off of a graphic novel.
There was a old one where there was a cowboy. He was I think it was Lone Star, and he was part Native American. He could call on the powers of different animals in order to give himself different abilities. And it was a cartoon when I was a kid.
Well, let's not forget Cowboys and Aliens was a graphic novel or a comic book series.
Absolutely, and I tell you what, Daniel Craig as a cowboy maybe a little less believable than Harrison Ford as a cowboy. But while the movie wasn't the most well received, I found it highly entertaining. It was enjoyable.
I was not mad that I saw that movie.
Yeah, I did not walk out thinking I want my $15 back. I walked out of that going, "Wow, I did not expect any of that," and I was entertained.
The trailers did a good job of hiding like the whole second half of that movie pretty well.
But to get back on track here, no.
New Mutants.
The catalog is deep. There's this movement for the darker aspects or some of the storylines out of those, and New Mutants looked like it had potential. And one more thing that Fox does that just misses badly. And there's been some Fox things that have nailed the original X-Men movie, while not the greatest thing at its time.
First two, maybe.
First two. Number 3 was okay, other than they wiped out all the people. Again, you can't have Phoenix just murder all the cool characters and then be like, okay, we're just moving forward. Now, I know there's differing opinions, but I happen to love Days of Future Past when they just go in and intentionally rewrite all this. Like, hey, all the things we screwed up, we're just going to fix by just basically rewriting a new timeline through this movie. Which was like, oh, well, that was really cool.
That was if not the beginning, they just kept ignoring each other, because Logan's like, well, that also didn't happen in my timeline, so...
Yeah, well, and you want to talk about a darker movie that really was fantastic. Logan is, in my opinion, comic book movie adaptations that really cut to the heart. Logan is the top. It's the benchmark because and again, the character arc, the build up, all the things. Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. That's another role. Like, they're going to eventually recast. It will not be the same.
Sorry, I accidentally sent you off on a Foxman.
But the Logan, as far as a darker movie, much grittier material, very violent, was amazing. So the thing is, there's a standard set that you can look up. There's also people who've gone before you. You've seen how some of these movies can be made and be made successfully. They had something to work off of. It looked like they could, yet they've done this.
They promised a whole lot more than they were able to deliver, because they were like, we want to do an X-Men John Hughes horror movie. Yeah. And what I've heard is that it just missed every bit of it.
Sorry.
So.
Just thinking of the horror movie version of
Breakfast Club,
or 16 Candles, or Pretty in Pink, or any of those.
Was Home Alone John Hughes?
I believe so.
Or is it Christopher Columbus?
Still the same kind of happy feel. Could you imagine them doing a horror movie, Home Alone? That's for a different topic.
All right, so now we're going to talk about the big release, the biggest experiment, Tenet. Christopher Nolan, I guess, thought I don't know if it was ego or if he was trying to have a measured approach, but he hammered the release of Tenet like none other. I think everyone kept trying to say, like, maybe we should wait. And he's like, it needs to come out. I don't want it in drive-ins. It's not going to streaming. And he was more adamant than anybody else in the industry about his movie coming out. And he, like, they would do pushes, it was like a couple weeks at a time. Like, he was just really trying to force it to happen. And I don't know if you heard about this. They said they would not release Tenet to be able to watch in drive-ins if there wasn't an actual theater nearby available to play it in. And I was like, I feel like you're just cannibalizing yourself for your ego. Because that was all Nolan.
Which is weird because he doesn't generally miss on stuff like this, but maybe he's trying to cling to the platform with which he's had so much success.
You could say he's trying to save theaters, which is that's what we're trying to talk about, I guess, is that how do we feel about Tenet is the biggest thing to come out since last March or February.
And I really want to see this movie, but of course we're not allowed in theaters in this state. But I understand where Christopher Nolan's coming from, and I totally get that. And he doesn't generally miss on movies, but that's in the production and in the storytelling, in the editing, and all the aspects that go into making a movie. He's dynamite, and he's got a track record of being right. But on making money at the box office, in a time when everything is so suspect, this may have just been a bad call. And I don't want to put him on blast for it. Maybe he's sticking to his guns. That's fine. If you have conviction, you believe this is what you should do that. But this may be a movie once everything's opened up that sees another run, depending on how its reception hasn't been the greatest so far. But I really want to see this movie.
And I want to say that I appreciate. I don't love the circumstances and how it came out and all the hoopla surrounding it, but I appreciate that something came out because it became a measuring stick for everybody else so that people could judge, because Christopher Nolan is pretty much box office dynamite. His movies don't make under $600 million. So for this one to not tank, let's get into some of the money with it. So Tenet was budgeted around $200 million and then add in the 50 plus million in marketing, and currently I just had to update this morning. It just crossed 280 million after almost a month of release. And considering everything, that's pretty impressive considering there's whole states that can't go to the theaters. However, since theaters taking the 45% ticket sales, Tenet really needs to make over 600 million to break even.
I think Tenet will see that boost when it finally does make it onto video on demand, which is sad because, again, a theater is a place to see. If you've seen any of the trailers, any of the stuff for Tenet, you know that that's a in the theater type of movie. It looks amazing, and it's sad that we're going to miss out on that. But it's the current situation we live in. I get it, but that movie had potential to be amazing, and forcing the timeline may have cost them a lot of money in the long run. However, we also know with Nolan, we don't know everything that might be coming around the bend, and getting that movie out now might be necessary for something he may have in the works down the road that could tie in, because studios now love the multi-movie tie-ins. And I know Nolan's not the biggest. The only one he's really done with that was the Dark Knight trilogy. I get that. But who knows if he has maybe something on the back burner building off of Tenet that he wants to do that he didn't. If Tenet's not out, he can't really build off.
Right.
And that's possible.
And that's presuming that maybe it's likely to be a singular property. I personally would rather this happen to a single entity like a Tenet than what if Black Widow was the first thing that tried to come out, and what if it made $280 million, and then that would damage the Marvel franchise potentially.
Hold on. How ridiculous are we now that a $280 million movie in the box office? It used to be if you made $100 million, it was a huge success.
But those were on $10-15 million budgets.
True. But now $280 million, it's like, that's a flop.
You're in the hole.
Yeah.
Tenet's in the hole right now.
And again, you have to look at the profitability. How much did it cost to make versus how much did you make off of it? But just the idea that if Black Widow came out and made $200 million, what did Iron Man 1 make?
Overall, I want to say it was 600 or 700 something.
Okay. And it laid the groundwork. It changed movies going forward.
I'm going to look that up.
It changed it going forward. But I remember that movie coming out, and it was a huge success. And it even survived through 2 less than stellar sequels for itself. If it hadn't been for the Avengers series, Iron Man's standalone movies were not the greatest.
I stand corrected, $585 million, so just under 600.
You were close enough by saying 600. But is that worldwide or
That's
domestic?
worldwide.
Okay,
Domestic is 318.
Okay, so again, if a movie makes 280, now is Tenet at 280 worldwide?
Worldwide.
Okay. Again, worldwide market has become kind of a benchmark too because China's
quickly becoming a large source of
absolutely
box office.
That's why they're putting so much stock in that new the new Marvel character Shang-Chi. That movie is the crossover to put an Asian lead into a movie, capitalize on both the domestic as well as the international market, knowing the international market is slowly becoming equal to. That's huge. I think Tenet, I don't want to say it necessarily is a miss, but the way we engage with the theaters now, I feel like this is a miss in the same way that Mulan was a miss by Disney mishandling the platform. If they're going to release it this way, put it in theaters. The people who love theaters want to go to the theater will see it. Put it on video on demand, maybe 1 month later, put it out there, and that way people can continue to consume from home. There's still a lot of people who don't want to go to the theater because they're afraid of catching COVID. There's a lot of people who can't go to the theater because they aren't allowed to go. And with that mix, again, you want to be everywhere. And I know they're trying to capitalize on the box office portion. Fine. Grab the money where you can grab it. But the faster you get it out to everybody across platform, the more money you're going to be able to get.
Also, the sooner it's on every platform, the less maybe they didn't know that the reviews were going to be wish-washy, but if you have it like just equal across the board and everyone can watch it simultaneously, you run less risk of the reviews hurting the movie, and you're more so riding the hype, because building up to Tenet, the hype was very high for this movie.
Yes.
And now I think, like me, and I think there's a lot of other people, that because seeing a movie in theaters is such an inconvenience at this point, because there's nothing nearby, and the reviews aren't like if this was getting 98, 99, 100% on Rotten Tomatoes or some of the main outlets, I think people would then be going out of their way to go see it. But it's not, and people are getting the sense that this is something that you could wait for. And I think that is really hurting the movie.
Let me just say this, because I got 47 kids, and it just keeps growing as this podcast goes. My movie watching dollars are tight, okay? And I know one of the questions in the outline you asked was, do I intend, with all this stuff, to see Tenet when it hits video on demand? Because we are in an area where I can't go to the theater. Now, if they were to open the theater tomorrow, I would have to consider, am I willing to take my entire family to see this? Or do I sneak out and watch it by myself? Or do I take my wife on a date and we see it? I do want to see this. I will see this movie. The question is under what format, and video on demand might be the one where I actually engage the movie in that way.
Which, like you said, for Christopher Nolan is disappointing for a Christopher Nolan film.
You really do the theater experience for his movies, because he brings so much visually to it. You have to be able to take it in on the max, and if you can do IMAX, you got to be able to take it in its full capacity in order to really experience the movie the right way. But if push comes to shove, I'm one of those guys who can watch a movie and still get emotionally engaged on my cell phone. I can still get that place because I can sink into the movie. I know some people need the theater to do that. I'm going to watch the movie when it hits video on demand, unless they open theaters first. But if they open theaters before then, well, I don't see that happening. But if they do open theaters before then the question has to be, is Tenet still out there? And also, what else is out there? Who's coming with me? But the movie is a definite must-see. They certainly did not help themselves by forcing the issue. And I think, again, like Mulan, this is a learning experience, not just for Nolan, not just for that studio, for all studios. Everybody's watching how these movies perform and learning. From Universal, a lot of people learned a lot. Disney tried to manipulate that in their own favor, kind of a miss. Nolan tried to push the box office.
Yeah, everybody that's doing anything right now is the first person to do it during this like time period. So every experience is a learning experience, whether it's positive or negative. Unfortunately, because of the unprecedented times, we haven't had a lot of. I mean, I guess learning is a positive experience, but a lot of these have been lessons hard earned or hard learned.
Everybody's a guinea pig right now to try and have to be the first to do anything. And the sad thing is, you could have tested it with smaller movies, but they were smaller movies. They were only going to make less than Tenet worldwide with a full box office, or with everybody wide open. It was going to take blockbuster movies to attempt these things to see what the maximum push could be.
And the sad thing is, we can't even get an accurate measurement of these moves because we can't get to theaters.
Yeah,
like because people are trying to measure if the low box office is because people are scared to go to theaters. Maybe, but I think you can't judge that unless theaters are open.
Correct. But again, that's something you have to take into consideration before you make the decision, knowing not everyone has access. And then once everyone does have access, do they want to go or do they want to stay cautious?
And theaters are limited to 40% capacity.
All those are in play and should have been part of the decision-making process. Perhaps they were. They took the gamble of going forward, and it may have cost them some money on the back end. But you know what? Somebody had to be the first one. I just hope that in the grand scheme, if Tenet is a really good movie, that it doesn't suffer the permanent consequence of this.
I think what studios should be doing, I know that theaters were doing this, so I'm sure they're working with theaters, is they're doing a lot of re-releases in theaters to kind of like, trumpet the horns that theaters are starting to open, guys. If you want to come in, come watch Back to the Future. Come watch Empire Strikes Back. And if there's a theater around me, because it's been 6-7 months, I don't even have a concept of time anymore, I would go watch re-releases. Tell me Jurassic Park's coming back in theaters. I will go see that to see something in theaters. And I think they need to be doing more of that and really pushing it, like having the studios say that, hey, for 2 weeks, this movie of ours is going to theaters, instead of these movies that are costing $150-200 million to budget that are just financially, I won't say devastating because these companies are huge, companies.
They're making a lot of money on streaming too. They're not hurting. Well, I mean, this is not helping them, but they're not strapped for cash. But again, we're learning through all of this. These are all things that they can build off of and understand, and perhaps this is why Disney has pushed every date. Perhaps this is why, other than Mulan, they've just decided to hold off for Marvel on all the movies they were working on and just put everything on the back burner because of the way these things are happening. And that's fine. That's cool. But as far as going to the theater, again, I'm with you. I would just like the opportunity. I would like the choice to be able to go to the theater if I wanted to or not, to be able to see something or not, instead of being told what I can and can't see. Because then we can look at it and say, well, how do people move forward? Or how do studios move forward? How do theaters move forward? Well, we talked about it last time a couple months ago, that who knows how many theaters are going to still be in existence when this is done. We're going to lose a lot.
Because we have really 2, maybe kind of 3 large distributors in the U.S. You got AMC and you got Regal.
Yep. If
either one of those goes down, you're looking at close to 50% of the theaters in the country. I think AMC has more theaters than Regal, I believe.
It's close, but AMC is number 1.
And then Cinemark, I believe, is your number 3, which not all their theaters are called Cinemark. I think that, because what I heard is we have a theater that is about an hour from here that is open in Olympia, but it's a Cinemark theater. And I don't know how they're going to do. But yeah, if any of those big 2 go down, that's huge.
Oh, absolutely. Again, I don't think either Regal or AMC are going to go under. What I think they're going to see is low-performing theaters are going to be gone.
Sure.
Until they can start to make some money back. But then theaters are under this hard part of, okay, if they do get to open, well, do they advertise that they're open? how much money do you need to put into advertising that you're open for business?
That's a fair point.
To be able to make that money back. It's a really tense time for that. And then do you put the dollars into radio advertising, TV advertising, social media advertising? Where do you put the money? And because you got to be able to recoup that and draw people in. It's a really, until I don't think we'll see a massive move to advertise until like full states, not county by county, but full states, full areas, West Coast, because then they can market to the entire West Coast.
What I've been seeing is they've had like an ad that'll pop up on YouTube for AMC saying like, this is what we're doing. This is our COVID prevention procedures. Please come to our theaters. And it's like, I would.
Yeah, but we're not only are we in one of the tightest states now, granted,
and counties.
we're one of the. That I was going to get there. We're in a state that has had very high success in keeping COVID under control. But with that has come a lot of tight control, which nobody really likes. And we're in.
Well, we were like the first infected.
Yeah, King County in Washington State is one of the first outbreak.
Ground zero.
And then, not only on top of that, we're in the most population dense county in the state with the most population dense city in the state, in a state that just has decided to squeeze. And so we'll be some of the last people. Like you said, driving an hour, we might have to go to Pierce County, Snohomish County, maybe over the mountain to Grant County.
Bet. I'll go.
No, I'm fully aware that you'll go. Again, I have to make it an event because I'm taking 6 people with me, unless I can escape for a day. But hey, if we need to coordinate it, so yeah, I think it's one of those things where you have to be. Everything we do right now has to be so calculated from both a theater, studio, customer.
Yeah.
You can't make any decisions right now based off of an emotion or a feeling. You have to use data and other things. And these movies, if anything, they're giving data. They're letting people know what's happened, how it worked for them, what they can try to be better. But I certainly feel like, I don't know if Tenet is necessarily a miss. I do feel like Mulan was a miss.
Sure.
So
I mean, Tenet, somebody with all, because there's so many like fall release dates and stuff, and everyone was pushing, moving dates around. Somebody had to stick to their guns, and
something had to come out. I mean, at some point. And granted, there's only a small amount of theaters nationwide, percentage-wise, that are open. And then even with those, that's a percentage that you can.
Last
fill.
time I checked, it was like a few hundred in the whole U.S., which is
well. If
not
that's
a
the
lot.
case, and the fact that he pulled 20 million or 280 million worldwide, that's amazing.
Well, it's also like if you are near somewhere and you hear a theater's open, and you go to the theater, and it's like, cool, what can I watch? And you look up on that billboard, it says Tenet. And you look around, anything else? Nope. I guess I'm seeing Tenet.
Yeah. Well, we might see that. That's a reality we're going to face, where you could go to a theater and be like, we're just playing 13 screens of the same exact thing. Pick your time frame, because this is the movie people want to see, and we've only got this many screens, and
they got to optimize on the screen since there's there's limited capacity.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, with only 40% capacity, if people want to see it, well, we've got to spread that out. That's why 19 theater screens might be playing. Currently, they might be playing 19 movies, whereas in a year, all those push movies might be playing 19 different ones to try and get them all in, because we're going to reach a saturation level where going to the theater is like, man, there's so much to pick from, unless things continue to push. But eventually, it will catch up, and we'll be back to normal-ish, whatever that looks like.
And Scott, I want to say, because since we're pushing a little bit past an hour, I would like to use this as a stopping point and then make talking about what's left for 2020 as a part 2.
Yeah, that sounds great to me.
All
Thanks
right.
for having us.
So please follow up on our next audio podcast to talk with us about what is left in 2020. There's Wonder Woman, Soul, 007, and all kinds of good stuff. So we will see you there. Thank you.